I want you to watch this clip of Douglas Murray on the Jordan B. Peterson podcast breaking down what he saw in Gaza as well as the absolute horrors of October 7th and the true evil on that day. Check it out.
It was a rather heavy, I'll do it quickly, but a rather heavy day when I went in to see the Hamas terrorists that had been captured alive. And one of them I recognized. And that was a moment where I really did think again about the nature of evil. And yes, it's hard not to think of it in a theological context in this. There was a family who on the 7th were in their home in a small community in the south. And the oldest boy was a teenager, had already gone to the beach with friends, and a landing craft of Hamas came in and they killed him and his friends. And then they went to the community, and the father of the family was there in the house and ran into the bomb shelter with his 2 teenage sons. I think the boys were 10 and 12 or thereabouts. And the terrorists came in, and the father, I've seen the video several times, it's pretty gruesome, but the father takes his 2 sons into the bomb shelter with him, and the Hamas throw a grenade in, and the father threw himself onto the grenade to save his sons. And they come out of the shelter staggering, I mean, both in their underwear and one of them, his eye had been blown out of his socket, and the other one had lost his hearing. His ear was off. And they come into the main room of the house, and again, it's all on video. And they're both completely disorientated, of course. One of them is saying, "Where's father?" And the other one is saying, "Didn't you see him?" And then the terrorist who killed their father walks into the room with a Kalashnikov and just looks at the boys, goes to the fridge, opens the fridge, and gets out a Diet Coke and starts drinking it in front of them. Mm-hmm. And also later asks where their mother
That's
is.
how you demonstrate that the suffering is irrelevant, right? With that casual consumerist gesture.
Yes.
Right, and that, what would you say, that perversion of hospitality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So inevitably, yes, you get to the question of how does so many people get taught this or encouraged into this? And I was very struck. This is very much in your wheelhouse, but one of the reunions of the survivors of the Nova Party, I got talking to a remarkable woman who was a therapist who was working with them, and these were, of course, all deeply, deeply traumatized young people who were, have difficult time for the rest of their lives. But there was a therapist who'd been working with them who I spoke with who said to me then, and it was something I thought about a lot, which was, don't forget, Douglas, that a psychopath is probably born. Sinoir was a type of psychopath, clearly. But she said, don't forget, sociopaths you have to make. And that was something I thought about a lot because, of course, what would happen if you had control of a civilian population like the almost 2 million people in Gaza, a population that doubled in the time that Israel was said to be doing a genocide there, by the way, but park that aside as a mere fact. What would you do if you had a civilian population for 18 years and you were a death cult and you ruled it? You would teach what Hamas taught in Gaza, which was to teach the young Gazan Palestinians how to join the death cult, to admire it, to be part of it, so that
to strive for attainment within it.
For it. It's all very well documented, but the soldiers who were going house to house in 2014, there was a relatively minor war in Gaza compared to this one. And there are many soldiers I spoke to who were involved in the relatively minor conflict in 2014, who were also in Gaza since October 2023. They all said that they noticed when they did house-to-house clearing going through, trying to find hostages, trying to find weapons, trying to find tunnel entrances, and trying to find the architects of the massacre. They all said the same thing, which was that in 10 years, there was a marked radicalization in the books, in the households, in the learning materials, in everything from, and it's not satire, you know, math textbooks of, you know, if you kill 2 Jews and kill another 2 Jews, how many dead Jews do you have? You know, this is the way you learn arithmetic in Gaza under Hamas. This is something that many of us noticed and had warned about for years. But the fruit of this education system, the fruit of this indoctrination was October the 7th. And look at it. It's been it was a catastrophe for the Israelis, and it's turned out to be an utter disaster for the citizens of Gaza.
There's an immaturity and self-centeredness about psychopathy that's probably intrinsic. So, and it does vary to some degree with temperament. Like, there are violent 2-year-olds, and most of them are socialized by the time they're 4. And the ones who aren't are never socialized. They burn out in their 20s. But immaturity itself is egocentric and pleasure-seeking and power-dominant. And there's no reason to assume that you couldn't maximize that with the proper training. I mean, we train people. Yeah. I know it's a rough realization if your soul is Rousseauian and you believe that there's nothing but good in the heart even of children. And it's not that I have anything against children, and I think they're delightful, but before they're socialized, they're not social.
Yes.
And so it's not that hard to maintain not being social. And then the consequence of not being social is you're alienated, you trust no one. So then you live in a society where, what's it like to live in a society where you can trust no one, where there's no social groupings, where everyone's hell-bent on destruction? Well, it's going to turn you against the world. And that's a temptation to begin with. You know, in the Cain and Abel story, Cain's temptation is to nurse resentment in consequence of the failure of his second-rate offerings, instead of to learn. And he kills Abel, and he fathers the genocidal masses.
Well, this is one of my conclusions about the nature of, specifically of anti-Semitism. It goes back to that Grossman quote, that it acts as a mirror to the failings of the person who suffers from it. So that, for instance, Israel's neighbors could notice that the society is GDP.
The Abraham Accord signatories deigned to notice that, and thank God for some small mercy.
That this country is doing awfully well, considering the existential threat to it constantly from its neighbors since its creation, since literally the minute of its creation in 48.
There's no land except desert. There's no water except
there's no oil.
The sea.
There's no oil. It's one darn bit of the region where there's no oil. And yet they make a success of it. And if you look around the rest of the region and you see
colonial enterprise, Douglas.
I know. But you look around the rest of the region, if you were Israel's neighbors in Jordan or Egypt, or certainly, you know, Gaza and the Saudi, you know, the Gulf, anywhere, it's a perfect subject for resentment.
They're all victims of the colonial enterprise, right? They bear no responsibility for their own misery.
There's endlessly someone to blame.
That's convenient.
That's very convenient.
Very. And someone to hate. That's even better.
And that's a great unifying thing among much more.
And boy, the worst of your people can really delight in that. And you just have to let them loose and encourage them.
But just think about how this has, how taking the wrong route, Cain and Abel has been such a disaster.
Well, Cain's descendants are genocidal, and then comes the flood. Right. That's the progression of the story.
Yeah.
And it's causal.
Yes.
It goes from the failure of the individual, the willingness to turn to resentment and bitterness, and then murderous sadism, and then to be the father of the genocidal masses.
That's one of the reasons why, I mean, as you know, I do get theological in this book eventually, because you can't not.
That's the problem with looking at evil.
Yes. That's right.
It's really right. There's.
But it's two things really, Jordan. It's first is that, as you say, I think we agree that it's hard to contend with evil unless you have some kind of theological appreciation of it. But the second thing is, of course, that comes from that is that one of the things I think about in the book is, well, then what's the opposite of that?
Yeah, right. Well, that's the next question that arises, right? That's exactly what would you say? The sequence of thoughts that occurred to me after I spent 20 years studying Auschwitz and the death camps and the Soviet Union and Maoist China. It's like, well, there's hell. There's some way out of that. There's some place that's not that. There's a place that's as far away from that as you could imagine. And there's a pathway to that. Yeah, well, the mythological landscape is the world of good and evil. No doubt about it. So
fascinating discussion there from Douglas Murray and Jordan Peterson. They are on another level. And I think, what they laid out with regard to Israel being this incredible state that built up out of nothing, no oil, it was a wasteland, and they made it this incredible place. And then, touching on the true nature of evil and calling it out for what it is. For more, you can subscribe to the channel, and to support us, you can go to our page buymeacoffee.com/JewishUncensored. You can also go to our channel memberships page on this channel. One more thing, we are thinking about creating merchandise, and we were wondering if you were interested. You can comment below merch, and we will get you that merchandise as soon as possible. Thank you for watching, and have a good one.